the major themes in Macbeth is power. Who has it? Who wants it? Who uses it for good? And who abuses that power? The 2007 question in the exam papers says that essentially Macbeth is an exploration of power, the use of power and the abuse of power. This is a very, very achievable and possible question for students all around the country sitting their mock exams this coming February and their leaving certificate in March. Macbeth is ambitious. We're all ambitious. And behind that ambition is a desire and a drive for power. Initially, you are faced with Macbeth on the battlefield. He exerts power over the opposition. He doesn't just kill his opponents, he carves a passage through them with his sword smoking. He exhibits power over the other half. This power is good. This is admirable power. This is power fighting for your country for good purposes. You are fighting for your king. You are a loyal subject of your king and your country. This is the Macbeth that we meet. When Macbeth learns of the prophecies according to the witches, he writes to Lady Macbeth and he tells her what they have said to him. And we see a change in the play. Without even having a conversation, without even breaking down the pros, the cons, the possibilities, an unspoken agreement is reached between Macbeth and Lady Macbeth that King Duncan must die. And that is the only way that Macbeth can achieve the title of king and therefore the power that is associated with that title. Therefore, you can argue that Duncan has the power at the moment. He rules the country of Scotland. He has that power. He rules the army. The army fight for him. He is an example of someone who has power and distributes and deals with that power in a healthy way. On the other side, you have Macbeth and Lady Macbeth who are driving their ambition for that deep-seated desire for power. And it's not just present in Macbeth. We definitely see it explored in Lady Macbeth. At that time, women did not have the power. Women weren't allowed to get jobs. They weren't really allowed to voice a loud opinion. They were there to be associated and known by their husband. Therefore, the only way that Lady Macbeth can gain power in society is through her husband. Therefore, her desire for what we call personal power sees her selfishness totally supersede her desire for safety for her husband, for well-being for her husband, for her country. That desire for personal power and personal gain is all that she is concerned with. Similarly, Macbeth is driven by a desire to be king. And from his reaction to the prophecies, when Banquo says to him, "Good sir, why do you start and seem to fear things that do sound so fair?" we know from that Macbeth jumps at something that should sound really promising and really inviting. He looks fearful. Why? Because he fears that the witches have looked into his heart and seen that forbidden lust for power that lies inside his heart. So personal power drives Macbeth and personal power drives Lady Macbeth. But Lady Macbeth has a logical stop. When Duncan is dead, she says to Macbeth that they have achieved what they have set out to achieve. They have achieved the power of kingship. They now rule the country together as a united couple. That needs to be where they stop. But that isn't enough for Macbeth. At that point, his ambition and his lust for power have taken over, and that abuse of power starts to rear its ugly head. He doesn't just want power of kingship anymore. He doesn't just want power on the battlefield. He wants what is known as absolute power. He wants power over everything. He wants control over everything, and his paranoia gets to the stage where his only chance to achieve that absolute power and to remove any obstacles to that is to kill those around him who stand to be a threat. Therefore, we see the death of Banquo. We see the death of the Macduffs. We see all of these deaths start to collect around Macbeth as his thirst for ambition and his thirst for absolute power grows. So just to put it into perspective, your question there is on the 2007 paper, and it says, essentially the play Macbeth is about power, its use and its abuse. Who uses power? Duncan. Does he use it to great effect? Yes, he does, because he is respected. People willingly fight for him in his army. The country is in uproar when he dies because a good king has been killed and the country has been left without a king. We see Macbeth reluctant to take the life of Duncan because Duncan is a good man whom Macbeth is proud to serve. The only reason that he kills Duncan is to advance his own sense of personal power. Therefore, we see Macbeth abusing power. We see Lady Macbeth abusing power. We see the witches abusing power. That supernatural power present in the text is unnatural. There is a supernatural presence, but those witches don't need to take such a vested interest in Macbeth, but they do. They almost make it a personal mission to see how far he will go before everything falls around his ears. And we can see Hecate have to step in and say enough is enough, because they have interfered with humanity. They have altered the direction that Macbeth's life has taken because they saw that thirst for personal and absolute power in the heart of Macbeth. Toward the end of the text, we can see order restored, as we see the rightful heir restored to the throne and the usurper has been removed from the throne. There is a sense that nature has been restored, the balance is back to equilibrium, and now the country will begin to prosper again, both politically, economically, and socially. Because for the wrong power to be on the throne has a knock-on effect all around the country. Scotland suffers, its people suffer, its economy suffers, everything suffers as a result of power in the wrong hands. So what I would do is when I would approach this question, you would always think, what am I being asked? You are being asked to clarify whether the play is about power, its use, and its abuse. You will open up with an introduction. Your introduction is not 3 or 4 lines long. Your introduction is you personally engaging with the question. So when you do that, you must identify what power is. That's your first item. You will do that through personal engagement. My understanding of power is that it is a driving force. It's a lust for more than we have at the moment. It stands to affect our decisions, our perceptions, the very development of who we are. In the play Macbeth, etc., etc., etc. So in doing that, you are laying out your plan for the answer, you are answering the question, you are identifying what power is, and you are personally engaging. That should take you to half a page before you are finished with your introduction. Your conclusion should mirror your introduction in that format or that structure. Your conclusion is the very last conversation, if you will, between you and the examiner. So if you are going to leave them with a lasting impression, let it be through your conclusion. Let them know that you have taken something from the play. You have learned something. You have applied it to your world and your understanding of power, and you have left with something altered or something enhanced based on your study. Otherwise, you're just like everybody else. Give the examiner something to think about. Show them what insights you have gained through your study of this theme or this idea. And even if you have a small error or an area in the middle of your points where you moved off course, a strong conclusion will save you. All is forgiven in a strong conclusion because the examiner is blown away by the strength of your delivery. They think the student really absorbed what was being asked. The student didn't read Shakespeare because they were made to on the course. They read it, they enjoyed it, and they had a unique take on what was being presented to them in the pages. That is how you get that higher grade. That is how you leave the examiner thinking, wow, I never thought of it that way. And if I did, this student has presented it in a much more fresh way, perhaps, a different way. You want to be different. Conclusion half a page, introduction half a page. In the middle, you are gearing for in or around 4 points in the body of your answer. Those points will each tackle something different with respect to the question. You must open up, as always, with a concept sentence, and the concept sentence identifies the idea or the area of discussion which will be in that paragraph. You will move on from your concept sentence or your topic sentence into a key moment where you discuss an aspect of the text in terms of the question. You will personally engage all the way through. The reason that you personally engage is because otherwise it feels just like something that was plucked from the back of the book. You always want to be different. You always want to remind the examiner that you are a person. So concept sentence, key moment, personally engage, develop and expand your answer. And at the very end, just when you move into point 2, you will grab on to point 1 and you will connect them. And you will do that through connecting that idea. So if you have said there is an abuse of power when you look at the character of Macbeth through his quest for personal power, this idea of power is mirrored in the quest for absolute power. And you will move on in such a way. Failure to do that means your points are not connected, your answer is not fluid, and your coherency, the flow, it just won't be there. And that will have a knock-on effect of everything. Because the marking scheme and the structure for your answer for Macbeth is 30% for the purpose. If you were asked a question on power, did you answer that question on power, or did you drift away into summary or into a character-based question? If you did, you can say goodbye to a large percentage of that 30%. 30% is allocated for coherency. How fluid was your answer? Did it move seamlessly from one point to the next? Were your sentence syntax correct? Was everything nicely developed? If this has been done, but your purpose has not, you cannot achieve your 30% in your coherency, because you can't be coherent in an answer that didn't answer the question. The third 30% that you have is for your language skills. If you start every sentence with and, or Macbeth, Macbeth, then your language has not been varied, you are not developing your points, it's going to get tired very quickly, and the examiner really won't be as engaged in your point as if you varied your language. Now, that's not to say your sentences have to be filled with flowery language and huge words that you just wouldn't use ordinarily. The odd one here and there if you're comfortable with it, but generally just keep your language varied. Keep it fresh, develop it, make it enthusiastic. Let the examiner see where your passion is coming from without starting each sentence with then. The final 10%, You will see that 10% exempted if you are in possession of a dyslexia exemption or an exemption for dyspraxia or any other such agreed exemption. That 10% is granted to you if you receive that exemption and that spelling and grammar waiver. If you don't, then you must be aware of your spelling, you must be aware of your grammar, your apostrophes, your commas, extra long sentences, capitalization, all of the things that, to be fair, we take for granted, but quite often, if we don't proofread, we miss out on these things. So your time management is incredibly important because I know that if a student doesn't proofread, they have done themselves a great disservice. When we are in the throes of writing an answer, we forget certain words. When we're in the throes of it, we misspell something that we know how to spell, or we forget commas, or the sentence is far too long because our thoughts are in that direction. So spend a couple of minutes proofreading your answer and it will make an enormous difference to the grade that you will achieve. So just recapping there, you've got your intro, conclusion, 1, 2, 3, 4 points in the body. Each point should tackle a different aspect with regard to the question. You must constantly link back to the question. Failure to link back all the time is going to see you summarize, it's going to see you move in a different direction, and it's going to see that purpose and that consistency and coherency drift away from the 30% that your answer would ideally be gearing towards. If there are any questions on that idea of power, you can absolutely contact me. I really do welcome any feedback, any questions. The reason for these videos is because it is difficult when you are given an assignment to wade through all of the notes that are in your copies or handouts. So sometimes it is actually really helpful just to have somebody talk to you and explain it, and to know that you can contact me with any questions, or if you feel that there's an area that's a little bit grey, you're not really sure if this constitutes a use or an abuse of power. What I would recommend is that you break your sections down. So after this conversation, take out an A4 page. Put power in the middle of that page. And with arrows off from it, I want you to write down absolute power, personal power, kingship power, political power, and supernatural power. Break those down into who mirrors that power, who embodies it, what moments in the text can we see this power being used, and does it affect the development of our characters and the decisions that our characters make. Power is the strongest theme that you have. I will cover the remainder of the themes, of course, but if you went into your mocks with one theme at the forefront of your mind, it is the development of that power, the thirst for that power, and how ambition and power are really, really completely interlinked. All right, I hope that made sense to everybody. If anyone has any questions, as always, you can pop a comment under here, or you can contact me on my Facebook page, Tramore Tuition. I'm also on Twitter under The Book Nook, or you can find me on Instagram under The English Teacher. I will pop up another video this week dealing with another aspect in terms of Macbeth. I will continue that idea of answer development and marking scheme, but if anyone does go to answer a question following this, and you do employ the intro, conclusion and 4 points in the middle, and you do want me to take a look at it, send me a screenshot into the Facebook page through Messenger, and I will take a look at it and I will tell you if I think you're on the right track or not. And I don't mind that one bit. I know how stressful the Leaving Cert can be. I know sometimes it's hard to go to ask your teacher for help when you're surrounded by your friends. So please do send me a message, send me a screenshot. If you're unsure at all, don't suffer. Send me that, and at least I can tell you if you're on the right track or not. Okay, thank you very much. Bye-bye.